Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Big Questions, Small Steps. My name is Amanda and I'm so glad that you could join me today. So in a recent presentation, we started experiencing and exploring the oldest known religions, and we started out with Hinduism, which is great. And we talked a little bit about how Hinduism essentially had two offshoots, Jainism and Buddhism. And after talking with my amazing boyfriend, he wanted more information. So when we ask questions, we learn and we grow. So without further ado, here's some more information on Jainism. Okay, so let's learn about Jainism. We're going to focus on our learning through 5 questions. We're going to start talking about how did it start. Then we're going to talk about what does it believe, how do they worship, what is the conversion process like if you choose to convert to Jainism, and then lastly, were there any internal divides and why, so we can just understand better. Let's start at the beginning. Jainism is, again, an offshoot of Hinduism. It started way back in the 6th to 5th century BCE, or before Common Era. It started when one of the observers of Hinduism, Vanda Mahar, or they're also known as Maharari, also known as the Great Hero as of now. He was a great thinker of that time, and they believe that he inherited a vision from predecessors about how Hinduism is supposed to be lived in today's form. So he taught that knowledge and he shared it with other people, hence creating the offshoot. Currently, as of today, there are about 6 to 7 million followers of Jainism worldwide, which quite honestly blew my mind when I started researching this, because I had never heard of Jainism before. It does tend to be centralized more in near India, where Hinduism is more prevalent. But there are Jainism practitioners, or Jains as they call themselves, worldwide. So intriguing to me. On to the second question. What does it believe? Much like Hinduism, it's monotheistic. So they don't believe that there is a God. They don't believe that there is a creator or anything like that. They believe that there are no gods. Okay? They reject the concept of liberation of one's immortal soul. So in Hinduism, they're talking about reincarnation. Every time you're trying to get to a higher level and a higher level and a higher level and a higher level, and then eventually your soul will be liberated. Jainism doesn't believe that. Okay? They don't believe eventually your soul will be set free to just wander among the cosmos. In Jainism, they believe there are five main vows that you take, okay? And they are listed in, Hebrew, goodness gracious me, in Hindu, but I am not good at Hindi, so I'm just going to tell you them in English. So the 5 main vows are nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, chastity or faithfulness to one's spouse, and then non-attachment. And they believe that you go through these different vows as you cycle through life. Okay. They believe essentially that there's 14 steps towards their end goal. Okay. So basically, when they still believe in reincarnation, but they essentially believe that there are 14 steps and you're constantly going up and down depending on how you're learning the lessons. Okay. Step 1 at the bottom is your soul is a slave to passions and ignorance and cannot recognize itself. It knows it's in a state of suffering and it's unable to break free because it's so deeply mixed in with delusion. Okay, so that's one stage. Stages 2 through 5 essentially are the same, but each stage takes the 5 different vows and begins to restrain them on themselves. So the 5 different vows that we just talked about and how they apply to themselves. So there's different levels that you're at constantly. Stages 6 through 12, the soul works on overcoming spiritual lethargy, increasing their self-awareness, and discarding their hurtful karma through mindful living and reflective life. Okay, so intriguing, like, okay. Step 13, you've mastered detachment from things of life, even attachment to an identification of one's own body. So they believe that when you get to this 13th level, your body isn't your own. You don't have any possessions. You're not connected to anything. You're more a product of the environment, and you don't take anything too personally. And then step 14 is achieved the transcending wisdom. So your soul isn't set free, you just gain all this knowledge. And when you have all this knowledge, then you join Vandamaha, the creator of Jainism, and you're just basically proceeding to follow him, and you live the rest of your life as another shadow of him. They believe that everything is either a living soul or a non-living object. So they believe everything has karma, everything has feelings, everything has emotions, everything matters unless it's a non-living object. So it sounds kind of elementary, but when you think about those 5 vows, nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, chastity, faithfulness with a spouse, and non-attachment, when you put it in that context, it's different. Your possessions aren't your own. Even if you have a spider in your house, getting rid of that is violence towards a living thing, and that can cause you bad karma and different retributions. So it's interesting. I like the ideas. For me, it tends to just go a little bit too far for me, but I'm very intrigued by it. Talking about what they believe in the afterlife. Again, they believe that your accumulated karma determines where your soul is going to be reincarnated to next. So in Hinduism, it was that your karma and the karma of your predecessors kind of all followed you. And males, their karma followed continuously. Females, their karma was essentially wiped away when they had their menstrual cycle. In Jainism, it's similar yet different. Your karma changes through your lifespan. They don't necessarily believe that karma can roll over for multiple generations. Okay, so they believe that depending on your level and your karma will determine your reincarnation level for the next life. And they believe these different levels are known as universal levels, and that's where your soul transitions through. So there are 5 different levels. There's the superior world, and this is basically where you're liberated, but not in the same way that Hinduism is. Okay, you're liberated, meaning you have all the knowledge and you are enlightened and you'll be a celestial being forever. So that's when you get to that level of you have all the knowledge. You're now going to be with the creator of Jainism. Okay, level 4 is the upper world. So you have a lot of knowledge. You love human beings. You can interact with the great celestial beings, but you're not there forever. You're constantly kind of jumping back and forth. Okay. Level 3 is the middle world. Now in Jainism, they have monks and nuns. Okay. Monks and nuns live in this middle world. This is also where all humans live. But monks and nuns live on like the upper stage of that middle world where they're close to transitioning to being more like celestial beings and having all this knowledge. They believe that that middle world is where they achieve enlightenment, where they're gaining that knowledge. Then you have the lower world, okay? The lower world would be equivalent to, in Christianity's, hell or purgatory. Purgatory would be a better explanation of it. Basically, they believe that there's 7 regions and the lowest of them is hell. So it's basically the 7 levels of purgatory, with one of them being hell. Beings here are tortured. They don't have happy lives, but the change in Jainism is they don't stay there forever. It's constantly evolving. You don't stay there forever. And then at the bottom is the base, and that's the lowest forms of all life. Now, I did some research to figure out, okay, well, what is the lowest forms of all life? And they didn't have exactly any answers, because to say, oh, this is the lowest form of life would be negative, which could be not non-violence, but it would be unkind to the lower forms of life, whether that's a plant or whether that's worms. I don't know. They wouldn't exactly give me an answer, but basically the lowest forms of life. So in my mind, I'm picturing like bugs or plants, because there's not a whole bunch of impact that they can do on that lower level, on that base level, but I could be wrong about that. So that's their views on the afterlife. Okay? Okay, on to question 3. How do Jainism or Jains worship? How do they strengthen their beliefs? So they don't have traditional worship services as one might imagine them in Christianity or Judaism, or even Islam, because they view worship in an organized sense as not only unnecessary but futile. They don't believe it serves a greater purpose. Now, there are some who will have images, or they will meditate, focusing on different things to help them connect better to the ideals of Jainism in their home. That's what some people do. Some people do sing songs or chant or dance with candles, because they believe the candle can be illuminating and can be piercing to your soul. Some do that. Now, I did say that there are monks and nuns, and they are supposed to be examples within the community. Again, they do pray and they chant and things like that. So sometimes people will go pray and chant with them. There are people who occasionally will go to like a service, but basically it's just praying and chanting together. It's not like there is a leader who is leading you through the service. Sometimes they'll go and they'll listen to a monk give their thoughts on something, but it's not like a weekly thing. That's not what Jainism does. Okay? Now, Jainism, I did talk about the monks and the nuns for a little bit. So because they have reached that higher level, they are disassociating with their body and themselves. So they will do things to kind of hold themselves to a higher level. So monks, for example, in one of the practices, the monks will be completely naked all the time, because they do not feel connected to their body. They don't feel like they need to be ashamed of anything. They aren't trying to hide anything. That's just what some of the monks practice. Now, there are also monks that wear white to symbolize like, no, they're pure, they're not doing anything. They will only use these robes that have been donated by other people. Again, that's just what other people do. The nuns, they typically wear white, and they'll typically wear it looks like an index card strung over their mouth. And that's to help them be more intentional about what they're saying and also prevent them from unintentionally inhaling bugs. And that struck a chord with me, like, okay, they take that vow of nonviolence so to heart that they don't want to injure anything. It made me wonder, so working in the medical field, like people have bugs and mites on them. Sometimes people get lice, things like that. It made me wonder, how do they cope with that situation? What do they do? Because if you're removing lice from your hair, for example, you're removing it from its life source. So, I mean, technically you could be saying you're causing it harm because you're removing it from its life source. But I'm guessing that's nitty gritty stuff that if I was very interested in Jainism, they would guide me a little bit more in. Okay. Just very interesting things. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the main holidays in Jainism. The holidays are known as Parvan, and there are a number of holidays. I'm going to cover a couple of them. The major ones are all associated with Turnhaka's life events. So there's different things. There's the descent from the mother's womb, the birth, the renunciation, when they acknowledge that they don't really have a body, they are more than a body. The attainment of omnipotence, and then the final emancipation. So when they finally received all their knowledge. There's different events that happen throughout the year, but it's not like they have parties or decorations, things like that. They'll do more praying and fasting to acknowledge these different stages in their leader's life. Okay. There is one of the main ones that they do is Ali, and that's basically a fasting ceremony. It happens twice during the year, twice. And what they will do is they will have increased meditations focusing on the image of their leader, and it typically happens for 9 days in a row. Now, that doesn't mean that they are fasting with no food, no water, no anything for 9 days. It's typically just during the daylight hours where they will fast, and then at night they can eat. That's just how they typically do it. The next one is Parishina, and that's basically abiding, okay? This one corresponds with the monsoon season. So when it gets really wet, really windy, really stormy, okay? This is basically the pacification by forgiveness and purification by forgiveness and service. So basically you're supposed to forgive and serve and do all these different things for other people. You celebrate it, again, through fasting. You listen to different speakers, and then you read the texts, okay? Sorry, I had a cough. On the last day, you give gifts or alms to people of the community that are poor. Sometimes they'll even give gifts or alms to the nuns and the monks in the community. Okay, because they don't have any possessions, so they may give things like that. But typically it's to the poor. The next one is Diwali. Now, this is typically a Hindu holiday. So in Jainism, it takes a slight turn. They commemorate, Nirvana, but it's basically the final liberation, gaining all that information, and all they do is they light lamps. In Hinduism, Diwali is a huge festival with lights and colors and celebration and things like that. In Jainism, it's more muted. They celebrate it by lighting lamps. Okay? And then there's another one, and this was an interesting one to me. I'm going to butcher it. Meslaka Biha. Basically, it means head atonement. So there's this giant giant statue, and it only happens once every 12th year. It's 57 feet tall, and it's of Buddha. And what will happen is on this specific day, they will climb or aerial drop different things to anoint this statue. They'll drop water and milk and flowers and all kinds of different things to show their gratitude. It's a huge deal. It only happens once every 12 years. But I found it kind of bizarre, especially when you don't worship gods, that they were going to be anointing a statue. So that one kind of struck me as odd to me because I don't practice Jainism, but that's another holiday to do. Moving on to question number 4, we're going to talk about the conversion process. With any religion or faith practice, there is a conversion process, steps that you would go through if you wanted to join that group, right? Okay, so first step, as most times, you need to learn about it. You need to learn about Jainism if you want to become a Jain. Number 2, you're going to learn about the core beliefs. Again, the monks and nuns live these 5 times. Full time. These are the 5 vows. The non-violence to every being. Every being. They believe all souls have worth and all souls have karma. And it tends to practice vegetarianism, but to a different degree. So they don't do honey because honey comes with the help of bees, and that's not happen. They won't eat root vegetables because they believe the roots have an impact on the soil, and the soil has memory, so they won't eat root vegetables, and they won't have any clothing that comes from animal skin or animal products. So no leather, no wool. The number 2 one is truth. They practice truth telling no matter what. But at the same time, if the truth is going to hurt someone, then they practice remaining silent. So that was intriguing to me. Number 3 is non-stealing. If it's not yours, don't take it, plain and simple. If you don't know whose it is, don't take it, plain and simple. If it's not yours, that's not for you. Number 4 is celibacy. Now, you can contribute to this by not masturbating and not having non-marital sex. So when you're married in Jainism, you absolutely can have sex, no problems, no concerns. But when you're not married, you cannot and should not. You also should avoid drinking alcohol or taking like other drugs because that can inhibit your processing capabilities. And then lastly, to live these 5 vows, if you want to convert to Jainism, you need to practice non-possession. So doing and restricting as much as you can to eliminate all the extra in your house. What do you really need to live? And that's all. And being very conscientious of what you need to live, how you need to live. Are there more sustainable ways for you to live? Things like that. They believe that the more you reduce what you have and what you need, the better your soul will be prepared to receive the enlightenment. Intriguing. Moving on to step 3 of the conversion process. After you have the different vows understood and you're starting to apply them, you then need to perform the 6 essential duties, which is prescribed in their book, about things that all Jains are supposed to do. So you need to worship with the supreme beings. So you need to spend time meditating with these people who you've just been studying. So ask for their wisdom, ask for their guidance, things like that. You're also supposed to follow the preachings of the Jain saints. So in Jainism, they do have saints who are those higher celestial beings, similar to Catholicism. Okay, they are also supposed to study the Jain scriptures. Again, you would want to understand what you're following if you're following that, right? And then you're supposed to meditate to realize yourself, attain salvation, and take your soul to complete freedom through that complete wisdom inheritance. So you're supposed to do a lot of meditating to make sure that this is really what you want and this is how you're going to do it. Then you're supposed to follow a discipline on daily engagement. So they want to see that you're able to carry this out for multiple days because there is no worship services or formal worship services, because there is no formal hierarchy in this. They want to make sure that you are disciplined enough to carry it out what you start. Okay. And then they want you to do charity of 4 kinds. So you have to do donate food, donate medicine, donate knowledge, and then, this is the trickiest part for some people, you have to save a life or protect someone else's life. In order to continue on in the conversion process to Jainism, you have to save someone's life or protect someone's life. Now, this could be like protecting somebody in a mugging. It could be providing the Heimlich maneuver. It could also be donating blood. Different ways to save someone's life or protect someone's life. It's just one of the steps that they believe you should have to convert, because in Jainism, it's not about you. Again, remember, it's that detaching of yourself from your possessions, your ownerships, your identity even. You want to gain that ultimate knowledge. So it's different. After you have performed all 6 of the essential duties, then you need to know the book of the Jains, known as Jinvara. You need to know it. Like, not just you need to have it memorized, you need to understand it on a deep level, okay? Then you need to be able to chant the mantras. So there are 2 main mantras. They typically start and end the prayers. So they are Navkar and Namokar, okay? And it's basically, I vow to be a perfect human being. I vow to be a liberated embodiment of the last soul. I vow to the masters and all the heads of the congregations. I vow to the spiritual teachers. I vow to the celestial beings. I worship all that have been destroyed in sin and obstacles, and I work among the auspicious of the forefront. So basically giving yourself continually over and saying, I bow to these, I bow to these, I bow to these, I bow to these, giving respect to all those things so you can receive that greater understanding, that greater wisdom is what they do. And then the last step before converting to Jainism is you need to follow all the rules of remaining pure. Okay? Now, it sounds relatively easy, but at the same time, when you're living in a society where you're not surrounded by people who are practicing what you believe on a daily basis, it's tough to remain pure in their eyes. For example, as a female, they tend to menstruate about every month, depending on their cycle. A menstruating individual cannot touch anyone or any place related to God or even anything made out of cloth and fabric. So if I was converting to Jainism and I was menstruating, I couldn't touch anyone, and I couldn't be any place. I could not touch anything that was made out of cloth, fabric, or in any way related to a god or a supreme being or anything like that. When I think about how many things just within my household are cloth or fabric, I wouldn't be able to sit anywhere. I wouldn't be able to be clothed when I was on my menstrual cycle. Like, there's major roadblocks that I'm not sure how they overcome that. but it's that practice of kind of withholding from yourself, separating from what you were and what you will be. That was a tough one for me. And to go farther, if you're menstruating, you can't go into the kitchen. So you can't make yourself food. Someone else has to make food and basically put it on a plate and put it like on the ground, because you can't go into the kitchen. And if somebody touches you, they're immediately unclean, and they need to go home and do a bath and a spiritual purification. And then you have to go before God and become clean again in 3 days. So it's interesting because Jainism doesn't believe in a god or gods, but they do believe that you need to go before a god or a celestial being or whatever. You need to meditate within 3 days to become clean again. So it seems a bit of a contradiction, like, well, they don't have a god or gods, but they also have a focal point. So it feels almost, and they anoint statues. So it's almost like they have an idea of a god, but it doesn't have an image. So then they'll use these different things to kind of hold its place, is how I'm understanding it. Now, could I be wrong? Absolutely. But that's how I'm understanding it. So just very interesting. Now, within Jainism, I talked a little bit about how different monks observe differently and different nuns. There are 2 main divides in Jainism, and basically the divides or the schools of practice regard the person who the religion is named after, Jain Agama. So this person essentially compiled all the earliest works of the greats who were enlightened and shared these ideas that were slightly different than Hinduism. So they compiled these works. One of the 2 decided that Jain, because they compiled these works, they raised to that celestial being level, and so they should be respected as such, as a celestial being. The other group said, great that they compiled them. No, they're not a celestial being. They're still just a human. So that's the difference in the separations there. And that's just how it's separated. One sees them as more of a celestial being. One sees them as just another person who correlated these works. Both still acknowledge them as important. Both still utilize the works that they compiled. It's just one puts them at a celestial being level, one puts them at a human level. Okay, so there you go. Now you know a little bit more about Jainism. Very intriguing for me to learn more about these different religions, and I'm actually really excited about continuing this process with you, because, as we say every time, the more you know, the more we grow. And the more questions we have, the more we can learn. It's exciting to be on this journey with you, and I am so grateful that you had time to attend to this this video. If you like today's presentation, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you want to be kept in the loop on when we release more videos, go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and we'll push those notifications out to you. I greatly appreciate all of your support, and thank you very much for tuning in today. Remember to keep questioning, because the more we know, the more we grow. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.